our first tip, thinking about how you feel about being in the role of patient. And it's just kind of worth, I think, just checking it out with yourself before you set off on kind of being a patient in another environment, whether it's, like we've said, peer support in hospitals and education, all of those opportunities we talked about. It's just kind of checking it out with yourself, because you don't want to get there and find out there you feel uncomfortable. It's much better to do that in the privacy of your own home and work it out and go, and maybe you can work through that by talking to other people who've done through the same thing. I think that's worth doing before we start off. Our second tip was connecting with other people doing similar work. Maybe create a little network. We're kind of really aware that doing this, you're not working in an office with a group of people like doing the same job you can call on. So it's quite nice to be able to talk to others. Like, it's been great talking to Hannah and George about their experiences today. Hannah, we've done a bit of this, haven't we?
I think, you can bounce off people, can't you, actually, if they've been through, it doesn't have to have been the same experience, but the similarities that kind of run through all of our experiences. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of camaraderie that comes with that as well, and assurance that actually you're not feeling isolated. As a double app, we've worked well together in terms of sort of being able to answer different questions that might not necessarily be specific to our experience, but are specific perhaps to the other person.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely.
And yeah, you can find all sorts of opportunities pop up that you wouldn't expect because you're talking to other people. And even if there's something you wanted to do and then you find you can't, maybe for health reasons or whatever, then you've got other people. And I've definitely benefited from that, even from our own Kindwin. And I ended up in a small kind of discussion, a round table with the King's Fund, unexpectedly, but incredibly interestingly, and I was so pleased to be part of it because Karen would have been invited and she couldn't make it, and it was because of those networks that I managed to kind of get involved in something else that was really important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it can work. It's like we need like a patient expert LinkedIn, isn't it, really? Yeah. So tip 3, we've touched on this, but be very clear about how much voluntary versus paid work you can do. I think we've alluded to the fact that we all find it quite hard to turn down any work, because you kind of empathize, don't you? Feel, oh, this is really valuable and I really want to make a difference, and that can be rewarding in a non-financial way, which kind of hooks you in. So I just think it's worth thinking, literally thinking how many hours can I give up of each week, or do it on a very black and white way, so that you don't end up with no money but doing all sorts of amazing voluntary work but without being able to afford to eat.
I think there's also a point there. I mean, I threw myself into voluntary work before I went back to full-time work, but then tried to keep the voluntary work on with the full-time work and quickly realised that was something I had to give somewhere. It's about having that self-awareness that you're not invincible, and that you can still do good, but if you do quite a bit, you don't always have to keep it at that level. You can sort of pick up bits and step back and bits down the line when you've got more time or actually more energy. I mean, let's face it, we all suffer with it, don't we?
Exactly. Yeah, you always need to look after yourself. And I know for me, when I had my son, suddenly I didn't have nearly as much time, and so I've kind of had to wind back on quite a few of the voluntary things I was involved with, and I kind of almost felt a bit guilty at first, and then I thought, what am I talking about? This is crazy. And people are totally understanding, and it's definitely anything you can give is a bonus, but you're definitely not expected to do anything. So don't feel that, if you can't do it for whatever reason, then you're letting anyone down, because you're not. It's just a bonus if you can do it.
Absolutely. Well said. And tip 4, we've got make short videos of yourself. Now, I think this is very much for people who are interested in sort of public speaking roles or giving talks to people. Obviously, we're aware that doesn't cover everything. If you're interested in assessing research, you don't need to make short videos of yourself. But if you wanted to go into hospitals and talk to people, or indeed, stand up at a Shine event and talk about your experience, it's worth doing this, just checking out how you feel, because talking live, you suddenly realize you come up and you kind of forget, and if you've not got the public speaking experience, which I certainly didn't before doing any of this, I found this really handy. And actually in other ways as well, when someone's asked me to do something like a speaking event, or if you're offering to do it for someone, you can send them a little clip of, this is just me talking about my experience, so they know what to expect. that can be quite helpful. Moving on to social media. Don't know how you guys are with social media. I'm a bit rubbish at it, I must admit. But if social media is a platform you're comfy with and you like sharing your story on social media, it's worth having a think about whether you want that to all be on your personal accounts. Because I mean, I've certainly ended up setting up separate accounts for my health, and one for my dog and one for my because I didn't want the stream on all of my accounts to be health related all the time. I found that I set up a separate Facebook page for all my Shine work, because I was finding it was it's a lot if every time you check online it's all about cancer and health, and you might want a bit of a break from it. So it's worth thinking about that if that's what you're going to do. And finally, using the contacts you already have. I think what we said, networking is such a great thing. But I think George has got quite good examples of how he used his nurses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you might hear my son in the background shortly, but that's all the fun of these Zoom recording things. So yeah, I got a couple of really interesting opportunities came out of people who I had met or been involved with during my treatment. So I was involved in the foundation of a kind of cancer patient voice organization group at my local hospital. So yeah, your local hospital where you have your treatment and so on, obviously people know you and they know your story, and so there are almost always opportunities to get involved there, so look into that. But also someone who worked on the ward while I was an inpatient went on to, and we used to chat for hours about how when you're trying to get better, it's about more than just the clinical side, and how can you actually get through the experience. And she went on to found a kind of quality of life charity, which kind of uses complementary therapies and so on to help people get through those really difficult experiences when you're in hospital. And as a result, and she, knowing me and knowing my kind of views on it and so on, asked me to be a trustee. And again, that's which for me is an incredibly special experience, particularly because it's someone who knew me all the way through. And so yeah, it's recognizing the people who you have had an impact on already, perhaps, or who might know your story. Yeah, just think about all the many people who are probably pretty amazed by what you've been through, and may well have interesting ways in which you could share your story, get involved, help out.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely second that. My consultant has a charity and I've helped him out on that kind of thing. So you think, like you say, you meet so many people going through this process, don't you? It's just not use them, because that's not the right way. It is. Use the contacts you have. So those are our top tips, and I think we're out of time, guys, but it's been so lovely to have you on. Thank you so much for joining.